Jnananjanachalakaya chakshurunmilitam jena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschyatyate Satharine. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Great honor and pleasure to be with all of you this evening. It's very great SOAS College in London. Thank you very much for coming. The topic of tonight's program is the sacred forest, and it's especially dedicated for the cause of food for all. I remember in my travels meeting a very gracious and holy person who told me that the greatest need in the world is food, nourishment. The greatest problem in the world was hunger. Not just hunger of the stomach. Because if you give some food, you can solve that problem. Hunger of the heart. What is the need of the heart? If we have enormous amounts of wealth, fame, power, prestige, but we don't have inner fulfillment, can there really be happiness? On this journey they were speaking about, it began in Luxembourg, where we actually had somebody, my friend Gary had another friend named Frank, who was sponsoring our whole trip to Europe for 2 months. Because we had nothing. But the first day he got robbed, and he went back to America. But Gary and I, how could we go back? It's the first time we've ever been out of the country of America. Anyways, we were hitchhiking, and wherever the person who picked us up was going, we'd go there. And a few days later, we were at the Isle of Wight, where there was a massive rock festival. I was on a spiritual journey. But this, depending on whoever's picking us up, was quite interesting. There was about 500,000 people, mostly young counterculture hippies, and all the biggest bands of the rock and roll scene. And I remember standing just maybe 10 meters in front of the stage as one musician named Jimi Hendrix was playing. And he was probably one of the most popular and considered the greatest talents of the time. A few days after the festival, I was in a town called Surbiton, sleeping on the floor of one of our newly discovered friends. And we learned that Jimi Hendrix was dead of a drug and sleeping pill overdose. I remember thinking at that time, he had so much money. He had any female that he desired. He had incredible fame and unbelievable talent. But such a sorrowful life and death. What really is it that I'm looking for in life? There was a silent call in my heart that day by day was calling me away from all of the pursuits that the whole society around me was telling me were the purpose of life. So eventually my hitchhiking took me 6 months later to the Himalayas, where I lived in forests. Very sacred forests. And I traveled from cave to cave, from tree to tree, along different rivers like the Ganges. And then I traveled down into the plains to holy places of Hindus and Buddhists and Christians. And I met this person who taught me that the real hunger is of the heart. The only thing that can satisfy the hunger of the heart is to love and to be loved. If we're not loved by somebody or by others, and we have no people to love, that even if we have everything else, it's like an empty bottle. Looks nice, but there's nothing inside. And that love is the inherent nature of the true self. The Atma, the living force that is seeing through the eyes, hearing through the ears, thinking through the brain, that Atma is spiritual. The Bhagavad Gita tells, Na jayate mriyate va kadachat, that the nature of the living force of every living being is we are unborn and undying. The body is like a vehicle. On the road in London, some people are driving a Rolls Royce, some a Mercedes, some a Toyota, some a Ford. Some are riding on motorbikes, some are riding on bicycles. They're all different kinds of vehicles. You can change your vehicle. But the important thing is not just giving fuel to your vehicle, but understanding the needs of the driver. The needs of the driver within everybody is to love and be loved. The Bible says the same thing. What is the use if you gain the whole world, but you lose your immortal soul? This is a universal principle. Beyond the limitations of of what religion, behind the limitations of time or geography. Who am I? And what really is fulfillment? I was taught that the origin of that need within us is the love between the soul and God, who has many names, who has appeared in this world in many forms to teach us how to find that love again. And just as watering the root of the tree, the water naturally reaches every part of the tree. When we discover that love within our heart, it naturally extends to every living being. Because we see and we realize that we are all truly brothers and sisters. There's a verse in the Gita, Vidyavanaya sampane brahmani gavihasti, suni chaiva swapakecha pandita samadarsha. What is true knowledge, wisdom, according to Gita? It is not just a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD degree, but real wisdom is the ability to see every living being with equal vision. Because when we experience that spiritual essence within ourselves, we see that same spiritual essence, a part of God, a child of God, in the heart of everyone. Whether they're black or white or red or yellow, whether they're one religion or another religion or no religion, male or female, whether they're humans or elephants or cows or dogs or cats, wherever there's life, it is sacred. And the greatest potential that we have is to find the fulfillment and love by honoring and respecting the sacredness of life, wherever it is. I was learning so many things from so many teachers. I just had these little robes that one sadhu or holy man gave me, and a little begging pot, and I was traveling place to place. Kind of like a little bee. I was going from flower to flower and collecting some nectar and feeling myself enriched. But somehow I realized I'm learning so many things from so many people on so many paths. But I need to focus on a particular path myself. But how can I make such a decision? Because I like everyone. And I like everything. And I don't know where I'm going. But somehow or other I keep going. I was in Nepal, in a forest. The area was called Pashupatinath, on the banks of the Bagmati River. Beautiful place, especially back then. This is 1970, 71. And I was praying for direction. And just then, this one holy man, sadhu, he said to me, he just came up and said, there is a pilgrimage in Kashmir, a place called Amarnath. And it is said that anyone who goes there, all their desires are fulfilled. So I had such a desire for that spiritual connection. And I was pretty superstitious. So I decided I'm going to Amarnath. How do I get there? He said, you just go to Kashmir. Now, in those days, in India, there was a special way of hitchhiking. for homeless, wandering mendicants, which I was trying to become. Instead of standing on the roadside like this, as I did for so many, I can't tell you, sometimes I was on the road for 2 or 3 days in America and Europe without a single person stopping for me. But in India, one sadhu taught me the process. He took me to a railway station, and we waited for the train. In those days, there were steam engines, and the train came to the platform, and it was still going quite fast before it stopped. And all of a sudden, everybody in the railway platform got up and started running as fast as they could alongside the train. I never saw this in London. Never saw this in Chicago. This was a culture shock. And the sadhu said, "Follow me." So I was running. And I was actually quite a fast runner. I was 19 years old. I was running, and everybody else was running. And I was thinking, what are we doing? We're running besides this fast-moving train. And suddenly I saw people, if they had any bags, they'd throw it through a window and then jump toward the window. And you can't jump in the window. You just jump and grab the ledge below the window as the train's going, and you crawl in. Fast-moving train. So I thought everybody else is doing it, so I guess I'm supposed to do it. I jumped. I grabbed the ledge, and I wasn't used to this. I couldn't hold on, and I looked down, and these steel wheels were rolling below me, and I was falling, and I was struggling. I was praying. God save me. Somehow or other, I struggled to get in. And by the time the train stopped, I saw every window. There were like person after person jumping in. And by the time the train stopped, there was about 400 people in a capacity car of 60. There was no question of sitting down. You were just standing, crushed. There was a price to pay, but not in rupees. Because you see, no ticket collector could get in. So I took a train down to Varanasi, a very holy place. And I went to visit the old burning ghats where they would burn the dead bodies, where months before I was living there and just meditating on what is death. And then I went to a temple, not far, called Kashi Vishwanath, one of the most famous temples in all of India, of Shiva. And there I prayed, from my heart of hearts, please show me my way. And I had this experience of a total certainty that very soon it would be shown to me. And I was thinking, when I'm in Amarnath, my wish is going to be fulfilled. So I dove into another window of a fast-moving train from Varanasi to go to the closest place to Kashmir. It was the monsoon rainy season. We were in the middle of this field, agricultural, when there was a massive rainstorm. The whole field flooded. The engine died. We couldn't go anywhere. And it was all muddy water. It was very deep, and there were so many snakes swimming around. You couldn't get off the train. If you did, you probably couldn't get back on, because it was really low. We stood there for over 20 hours. No possibility of moving, just crushed by human bodies. incredibly hot. There was no water. There was no food. And if you had to go to the bathroom, it would take probably at least a half hour just to get through the crowds to get to the bathroom. And I'm not going to explain to you what the bathroom was like, considering there's going to be a feast after us. But an abbreviated version, it was just a hole in the floor, and underneath was the railway tracks. Quite expedient sanitation process. But the problem is, because it was flooding underneath, there was all this muddy water coming up from the hole. And people were going there, and because when nature calls, we have to honor that. So when I went to that bathroom, I'm not going to go into any more details. It was floating all over the place. You're desperate. Anyways, you know how these traffic jams are in London? There's something about stagnation that is so against human nature. It's quite unnatural. After about 20 hours, the whistle blew, and the steam engine started pumping, and the wheels began to move. It was like being liberated. Movement. It was like, in my life, that was the ultimate traffic jam. Finally, it was about 30 hours since we began the journey. The train stopped at a station. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, still dark. And a lot of people were getting out through the windows. Because if you try to go through the door, you'll miss the stop. So they were jumping out through the windows. But simultaneous people trying to jump out through the windows was more people trying to jump into the windows. So I struggled like anything. I was practically fighting. Somehow or other, I was trying to be nonviolent, but I had to get out of there. My goal was to get out, drink some water, breathe air, and then jump back in, and even move my limbs. So I somehow or other struggled to get out. And I ran and drank water. And then I took some really nice inhalations and exhalations, and I moved my limbs, and I went to jump back into the window. But it was a solid block of humans. I bounced off. And another window bounced off, another window bounced off, and the train was gone. I had no idea where I was. I had nothing. So after everybody kind of went in and out of the railway platform, early in the morning, it was empty. And I saw a few sadhus sitting around a fire. And I walked up to them, and one of them got up very gracefully, as if he was waiting for me. I said, "Where am I?" He said, "This is Mathura, Krishna's birthplace. And today is the holiest of all holy days, Janmashtami, Krishna's birthday. Come with me, I will take you to Krishna's birthplace." I didn't know it was Krishna or anything like that, but I was considering the river of destiny has taken me here. So he took me to this place. On that day, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, maybe 1 million people in this one area to celebrate the birthday. And there was dancing, and there was singing, and there was dramas, and there was lectures, and people were throwing colors on each other. And I was a Himalayan yogi, so I was just sitting on some steps like this, thinking I'm I'm never going to dance or do any of these things, but this is very emotional experience. It was a very deep spiritual experience. And I was hearing people talk about Vrindavan. So many people were telling me about this forest called Vrindavan. The next morning I was bathing in a river, the Yamuna, in Mathura. And something came over me. I'm going to go to this forest of Vrindavan. And after 3 days, I'm going to get on another train and go to Kashmir, where my desires will be fulfilled. I started walking down a road. It's an 8-mile road from Mathura to Vrindavan. And as I was walking, there was nothing around, just trees, buffaloes and cows and some ox carts. That's the way it was in those days. And then this old jalopy bus was kind of going up and down with the holes of the road, and saw me and stopped. And the door swung open. And this bus driver, he smiled. He had no teeth. He had a beautiful smile. And he just had a little cloth around his waist, and he wore nothing else. And he was dressed like a devotee, traditionally. Shaved head, a little tuft of hair in the back. And he called to me in Hindi, "Come, come." I said, "Rupine, I have no rupees." He said, "Oh." He said, "Seva, seva." So I just jumped in the bus. We arrived in Vrindavan. I didn't know where to go, but I used to love to sleep on riverbanks. So I just asked him, "River?" And he went like that. I got out. I started walking down the road. And within about 2 minutes, this one farmer, he stood right in front of me. He blocked my path. And he said, "I am a Brijavasi, a resident of Vrindavan." He spoke in English too. He said, "Anyone who comes to Vrindavan is my beloved Lord Krishna's special guest. And it is my duty to serve you. Where are you staying?" I said, "On the riverbank." He said, "Where are you eating?" I said, "I always beg for my food." He said, "No, I will take you to an ashram and I will provide meals for you." I said, No, I like to beg and I like riverbanks." He said, "You must please." He started to cry. He said, "If you don't accept my service, how can I look at Krishna?" So just to please him, I went with him. I just instantly fell in love with this man. He was quite old. And he took me to some blind person's ashram, and they provided me some nice wheat bread called roti. I decided to explore the forest. The sand was very soft on my feet. I walked through a little pathway where there were beautiful trees. This is during the monsoon rainy season. The trees were full of flowers and leaves. I heard, and I looked to my left and there was a beautiful white cow. Her glistening black, large, round eyes were gazing upon me, as if she knew me. And I gazed upon her, and I really felt that I knew her. It was like she was welcoming me home. I walked a few more meters, and I heard this, "Ah!" That was terrible imitation. It wasn't a cat, it was a peacock. wings, and its feathers were beautiful, like a magnificent fan. And the feathers were going back and forth, trembling. And the peacock was looking at me and dancing. I was thinking, this is a magical place. Then I heard the sound of birds in a tree, and I looked up at this flower-filled tree, and there was probably about 30 or 40 beautiful green parrots with orange beaks and bright red eyes. And they were chirping to each other. Then one of them saw me, and immediately they all flew away. Then I heard this, I looked up at another tree, and there was all these monkeys. They were swinging and playing and going from branch to branch. And every now and then they'd look at me like, I don't know what they were thinking. But I just felt I was home. But the most beautiful thing I experienced were these little girls, maybe 6, 7 years old. They were dressed in very simple little clothes. They were obviously poor village girls. And some of them had pots of water on their heads. Some of them had baskets of wood and other things they were collecting from forest on their heads. But as they were perfectly balancing these heavy weights on their heads, they were dancing. They were dancing together. And the whole time they were dancing, they were smiling blissfully. And they were saying, Radhe, 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 Radhe. And they came right up to me, dancing in front of me, going, Radhe, Radhe. And I was thinking, I don't know what is this Radhe, Radhe, but it's definitely something good. So they went on dancing forward, and I just wanted to be with them. I was following them with my little sadhu stick. I was following them and just struck with wonder how these children could be materially so poor, so simple, but they were the happiest little children I ever saw in my life. As I followed them, we came to a clearing where the river Yamuna was flowing. I was following the little girls along the bank of the river. And I saw this big tree. And the tree had a hollow trunk. It was an ancient tree. And in that hollow trunk was crouched down this ancient holy man. It's hard to explain. I wish I had a camera in those days, but I never had a camera, because I thought camera was a material attachment in those days. This person, I was told later he was 110 years old, and he looked old for his age. I think for at least 95 years he hadn't cut any of his hairs, because he had this white matted hair that was just wrapped around his head, layer after layer after layer, like a gigantic beehive crown. And he had this gigantic beard that he just tied in knots so that it, wouldn't get in his way. And his eyelids were so heavy that with one hand he would open his eyelid. And he was just crouched down in the hollow of this tree, and he opened his eyelid and he saw me and called me over. So I went up to him, and I discovered he's a Moni Baba. Do any of you know what a Moni Baba is? It's a person who vows to never speak a single word in their life. So how do they communicate? The way he communicated is he had this jagged piece of black slate and this clump of chalk, and he would write on it. And believe it or not, he wrote perfect English. He called me over to write a message to me. And I was, crouched down, sitting next to him. Would you like to know what he wrote? Yes. It's quite interesting, actually. He wrote, "People think." That's all that fitted on his slate. And with his fingertips, he wiped it off. It was just like a blurry white, black. And then he would, "People think," wiped it off. "That the residents of Vrindavan," wiped it off, "are crazy." I was wondering, what's happening? Then he wrote, "It is true." Wiped it off. "We are crazy." Wiped it off. "For Krishna." And then he wiped it off. And then in the same style, as he wiped it and wrote and wiped and wrote, he said, "If you stay here long enough, you will become crazy too." Then he closed his eye. Then he couldn't see me, and okay, that's the message. This magical forest was doing something to my heart. And there was a struggle in me. Should I stay here, or should I go to the Himalayas to Amarnath? I must go to the Himalayas in Amarnath. So, the night before I was supposed to leave, just 2 days later, I lay down in the riverbank, and I remember offering a little prayer. "My Lord, please guide me." The next morning, from a distance, temple bells were ringing. And I was about to get up to walk to Mathura and get on the train. But when I tried to get up, I had no strength. I was sicker than I had ever been in my life. I was burning with a torturous fever. I was totally nauseated. My stomach was like stabbed with pain. And I couldn't even stand up. I could hardly move a limb. I was just laying on that muddy riverbank, hour after hour after hour, helpless. And as the sun was growing higher, vultures, those big vultures with the long necks and curved beaks, they were circling above me. And they were getting lower and lower. And I was laying there. I couldn't get up. And one vulture came all the way down. He was like the representative of all the vultures. Because they saw that I was being cooked by a fever. And he wanted to see if I was well done. So he stabbed his beak in my chest really hard. They're strong. And I just cried, no, I'm alive, I'm alive. I knew vultures didn't speak English. But I was like trying to move as much as I could, and he just stared at me in the eyes and said, "I'll be back." With his glance. And then he went up and joined the others, and they were going lower. And then I blacked out. And suddenly I felt a hand on my head. It was a little farmer. And he picked me up and threw me in the back of an ox cart, on the wagon of him. And he had these oxen pull me to a charitable hospital. Now in 1971, the charitable hospitals in Vrindavan, India, To be honest with you, the doctors and nurses made the vultures seem very, very compassionate. But anyways, I had typhoid fever. And when I finally, got better, just by drinking glucose water, the doctor said, you cannot go anywhere for 1 month or you will die. That's, the way I traveled. So here I was, trapped in the sacred forest of Vrindavan. And you know something? That sadhu in the tree was right. I became crazy. Crazy for Krishna. I found there the path of bhakti. What is bhakti? I remember one time I was walking along the riverbank, and a very, very great saint who I knew well, his name was Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. He was a godbrother of my guru, who discovered me later. And Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj was a simple man. He would chant the names of the Lord day and night. And one day, it was a holy day, he said, come with me and sit under this tamarind tree for the next 24 hours and we will chant together. I didn't know what to expect, but I agreed. He sat and chanted God's names, this Krishna mantra. And he was in such absorption throughout the day, throughout the night. He didn't eat a speck of food, he didn't drink a drop of water, he was just singing. I was a 20-year-old boy. I was hungry. I was thirsty. And more than that, I was tired. As the night was getting later and later, he had more and more enthusiasm. Tears were filling his eyes. Sometimes as he was just chanting on beads, this mantra, sometimes singing, sometimes just uncontrollably dancing. I was thinking, who is this person? For him, it was not an austerity. It was not a hardship. It was simply pleasure. And finally, the sun rose. And he gave me some water. He didn't drink himself, he just gave me some water. And I asked him if he could tell me, what is this bhakti? And who is this Radha that everyone's singing about? As soon as I said the name Radha, he began to cry. And he smiled. He said, according to the scriptures and the saints of India, there is one God. Yet this one God has both a male and female nature. Krishna is a name for the masculine principle of that one truth. And Radha is a name for that feminine potency. That male and female aspect of the divine, Radha is the supreme lover, Krishna is the supreme beloved. And we believe that this love of God is the origin of all love. That Krishna, as the supreme object of love, is all attractive, supremely beautiful, supremely sweet, supremely kind, And Radha is the very origin of all compassion, forgiveness, and love. This concept thrilled me. He explained, and I learned later, that I actually asked him, what is the relationship between the love between the feminine and masculine aspects of the one supreme God of all religions and the love between people in this world? He said, this love for the Supreme is inherent as the greatest potential within all of us. It is our nature. But when we forget that, then we try to find a replacement for that love through so many experiences, through our mind and our senses. Real happiness is not what we take from without ourselves and bring it in. Real happiness is experiencing what is within us and sharing that with everyone in the world. He explained that that feminine dimension of the divine manifests in this world as Bhumi, or Mother Earth. The earth is like the body, just like we have our body for the soul, our soul is like the body for the soul of Bhumi Devi. This feminine potency of the Lord that descends into this world. And she is the mother for everyone. She nourishes us with everything, with water, with food, with air, with our bodies, with our brains, with our loved ones. And to respect, honor, and be grateful for the gifts of Mother Earth is an inseparable part of our spirituality. And this was fascinating to me. Environmentalism, or ecological friendly lifestyle, goes beyond just leaving the world a better place for our children and grandchildren. But it's actually an inseparable way in which we express our love for God by living in harmony with nature. Bhakti, he explained, is that path which is especially aimed at awakening this love within our hearts. And he said, and our way of doing it here in Vrindavan is through the chanting of these names. Just like a frequency of tuning in. There's satellite TVs these days, and so many channels. In my time, when I was a little boy, because I don't watch television in quite a while, there were 4 stations. Now there's hundreds, and you just press a button, and you see a soap opera, you see a cricket game, you see the news in Baghdad. That means these frequencies are everywhere. It's just what you tune into is what you access. In Bhakti, I was taught that grace, this grace of God, is all pervading and everywhere. And this chanting of these mantras, this type of meditation, tunes us into that frequency of grace. And that cleanses us, empowers us with love, with compassion, and with the incredible happiness that awakens. After some time of living with people like this, I live with great yogis, I live with great scholars, if you read the book that I wrote, The Journey Home, people who could perform so many incredible supernatural miracles. But nothing compared to the simple, humble, loving wish to serve others. So I decided to never leave Vrindavan for the rest of my life. One time, as I was walking through a forest, I saw a pack of angry monkeys. They were huge. They were screeching and growling, and in the middle of them was a newborn calf. This little calf was trembling in fear. Eyes were weeping in anguish. It was helpless. And that little calf just desperately mooed for her mother. Meanwhile, I went to try to find a stick to chase the monkeys away. But before I could find a stick, I heard the mother of this little calf roaring out a moo. And she came, like, these monkeys are dangerous people. There was about 15 of them. This mother came galloping, and with her horns and her fearless motherly love, she scattered all the monkeys away. They couldn't believe. She was like fanatically defending her little child, and the monkeys were fighting with her, and finally she was just, they all ran away. The cow licked her little calf again and again and again until the calf felt safe enough that she drank her milk. And I was thinking that I was taught if we call out God's name like a baby in a desperate condition for mother, then we will access the divine presence of the Lord within us. And that was a great lesson. When will I be able to pray like that little calf? And then I was thinking, in the West, humility is often seen as self-effacement, a lack of self-care, inferiority complex, depressing. What is real humility? And that day, I happened to meet a simple little man that I'm going to tell you a little about. There's a lot about him in the book. His name was Ganesham. He was from a kind of royal family, but when he was a very young man, he came to Vrindavan and decided he never wanted to leave the sacred forest. And a form of Krishna, a deity, he discovered under the earth. But he had no money and nothing, and somebody sympathetically gave them a closet in their house to make it into a temple. Somehow, somebody took me to that little closet. It was just in the hallway. The family was like cooking and playing and walking by with no concern for him, and he was just lovingly doing his devotion. He had been there over 50 years, never left the closet. But his simplicity, his humility was very small, very thin, very old. It charmed me. And every day when I came, he would give me 3 rotis. That means simple bread. One day, when I was bathing in the river, this one holy person was walking by, and every day he would walk by and bless me. But this day, he shouted at me. He said, "Because of you, Ganesham is starving." I said, "What?" He said, "He never leaves his closet. Somebody brings him 3 rotis every day, that's all he has, and you're eating them every day. He hasn't eaten in days." I said, "I didn't know." I couldn't resist going to Ganesham. He was such a sweet, loving person. I was learning so much from his character. So I went there and he put a little leaf plate with the rotis on it. And I said, Ganesham, I am not hungry, I will not eat. He said, no, no, you must eat. I said, no, no, I will not eat. I'm not hungry. He said, you must eat. He put his hands together. He said, is it that I have done so many sins that you will not take my food? I said, Ganesham, you haven't eaten in days. You're starving because I'm eating all your rotis. He said, no, no need, no need. He said, I have so many rotis. I said, show them to me. He said, no need. You eat these rotis. I said, I'm not going to eat them until you show me. Where are your rotis? He said, in that closet. Another closet. So I jumped up and ran in the closet. Not only was there no rotis, there was nothing in the closet. I said, Ganesham, you are starving because of me. I will not eat these rotis. You eat these rotis. And with tears, he said, you are Krishna's friend. I am only the servant of his servants. My greatest and only happiness is to serve others. Then he held my hands. And he said, please do not deprive me of the one thing that gives me happiness in life. The one thing I live for. Eat these rotis. I started to cry. Just to please Ganesham, I ate all his rotis. But I had a plan. The next day, I came to his house about 3 hours later than I would usually come, knowing for sure he would have eaten by then. As soon as I walked through the little door of the house and he saw me, he was calling out, you have come, you have come! Krishna has been waiting for you! And I looked on the altar, and there were the rotis still sitting there. He said, Krishna will not accept my offering until his friend comes to eat it. And he gave me his rotis. It's a long story. And we don't have time to go further. But this simple man simply loved God. And the nature of his love of God was in his own way, he loved to serve others. I was meeting many people like this, and this sacred forest was inspiring me in so many beautiful ways. 5,000 years ago, Radha, Krishna, and their most intimate loving associates lived in that forest. And the stories of what happened are recorded in many scriptures, especially the Bhagavad Purana. About 6 months later, after I was there, a great devotee, a great scholar and a great saint named Srila Prabhupada came. You see, myself and one other named Asim Krishnadas were the only Westerners in all of Vrindavan in those days. Srila Prabhupada came with 40 Westerners. I was thinking, this is really special. And the mayor and all the town came to welcome him because he had left there with nothing, and now he's coming back with so many people who are really interested and devoted. And in his company, I just felt that essence of compassion to others. I learned how he left Vrindavan when he was 70 years old to go on a cargo ship 38 days to New York City without money or anybody. He had several heart attacks on that boat. And yet I saw some prayers that he wrote. Prayers where he's simply praying to his Lord. Give me the words. Give me the grace to awaken this love in people's hearts. When Srila Prabhupada came to America, somebody asked, we have our own religions, why have you come? He said, I have not come to convert. I am come to enlighten. The essence of every religion, the essence of life, is to discover that love that's within ourselves and to be an instrument of that love in whatever we do. Whether we're politicians, whether we're academics, whether we're farmers, whether we're engineers or scientists or swamis. If we utilize our talents and our gifts to be an instrument of that love within our hearts, that's where the greatest fulfillment is. And I learned that that sacred forest, it's not just 90 miles south of Delhi. That sacred forest is in every one of our hearts. And our real journey home is to find that love within ourselves.